This is the second half of Absolutism notes, and we're going to start with, we just finished Spain and England, and we're going to start looking at how religion plays back into all of this. So the first thing that happens is that once we get different religions between empires, they're going to start fighting with each other. We're going to have the 30 Years' War start over a religious conflict between Protestants and Catholics. And it starts in the Holy Roman Empire when a group of peasants decides that they want to be Protestant, but their lord is Catholic, and so they start fighting and essentially start a civil war. We know that it's eventually going to become a war of territory and power. Our friend Cardinal Richelieu is going to change the war from politics to religion because he wants to get rid of the Habsburg influence in France. Okay, the Habsburgs are marrying into noble families, and he's not so happy about that. Cardinal Richelieu is the main advisor for Louis XIII. During this time period. We also talked about, in our past unit, the Edict of Nantes. This should all be review for you. Remember, you can stop the video or pause it at any time and rewind things if you missed something. The Edict of Nantes is signed because of massacres of Huguenots happening in France. The Catholics and the Huguenots, French Protestants, are killing each other. And so the Edict of Nantes allows the Huguenots to practice their own religion safely without being harmed. So that's going on during that time, and the 30 Years' War ends, well, it kind of pauses with the Peace of Augsburg where princes get to choose the religion, but then it turns into a political war, and the Peace of Westphalia is going to end the entire 30 Years' War. All of the fighting between pikemen. So happening during this, what's happening during this in France, we have King Louis XIV. Okay, he's from the Bourbon family. He is called the Sun King. Okay, and he says at one point, I am the state, or l'état c'est moi, which means I am the center of this country. I am the thing that runs everything. I am the light from which all the country runs. Okay, so he really is a true absolute ruler. He's one of the best examples. He's going to do a couple things. He sets up French colonies in Canada using two different explorers that we talked about. Let's see if you can remember their names. Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain. Louis XIV is the one that sends them over. He is also going to triple revenue by taxing peasants. He's a very big spender. He's going to fight 4 different wars, which are really expensive. He's trying to gain territory and power. However, he is also a patron of the arts. He's going to work to lessen the power of the Pope by asserting authority over the church. He'll do things like, I'm going to name this person as bishop, not you, or I'm going to put this person in charge of that church, not the Pope. The Pope could make a certain rule, a church rule, and Louis would say, nope, we're not doing that. Louis is going to also build the Palace of Versailles, which is a huge palace outside of Paris. He ends up leaving France bankrupt because of this, okay, after 72 years of rule. Now, he builds Versailles in order to control the nobility. The first way he does control the nobility is filling the high offices with commoners. This means that the people who have merit or who have the ability to do the job are the ones that get the job. So it means that just because you're the son of someone from a good family doesn't mean you're going to get the job. You actually have to be able to do the job. Now at Versailles, a lot of the nobles are going to end up living there. It's a huge palace. It can house, I believe, at least 500, if not more. They're going to entertain the nobility with lots of parties, and life is going to be centered around the balls and the parties and the celebrations and the grandeur. Everybody has to have the best clothes and the highest fashion of the time, and it's super expensive to have all of these balls and parties. So it's no wonder that France goes bankrupt. But the purpose of building it is to inspire awe, so that people look up and see it and their jaw drops. And so Louis is going to be adding to the palace throughout its entire life, and you can see a picture of it here, one view of the palace. This is just a wing of the palace. This is a bird's eye view of the palace. You can see the main part of the palace is in the center. That's where the king would have his apartments and his rooms. And then in the wings off to the side is where you would have the nobles living. And then these buildings down to the right and left would be things like stables and servants' houses and stuff. The king also had woods created, so like they planted thousands of trees so that he could go hunting. And they had elaborate gardens built for the king to walk among. Okay, here's a picture of one of the fountains that is outside of the palace. This is the Hall of Mirrors, which is a long, about a football field length hallway inside the palace. Everything's covered in gold and crystals and all of that, and people would stand in this hallway and wait for the king to walk from one end where his bedroom is to the throne room at the other end, and just hope to get a glance from the king, because that means you might be in favor. This is the ceiling of the Hall of Mirrors. It's kind of like the Sistine Chapel, maybe not as pretty, but you can see how everything is gold, how expensive that would be, how much grandeur. This is the outside of the palace, one of the gardens that was created. You can see how they have elaborate designs carved into the grass. They would actually take scissors in order to make sure that the landscape was perfect. Back inside, this is just a corner of one of the rooms in the palace. Okay, all of that is marble and painted ceilings and paintings on the wall and gold and quite elaborate. Louis is going to build his own private chapel where he can go to church, and he has his own bishop and cardinals to perform the mass for him. He's also going to have his own opera stage, so he can go and see an opera anytime he wants, and if you're in favor that week, you might get invited to join him. Now, his wife is also going to have her own bedroom or series of rooms that constitute her what they call apartments or bedroom. So she's got a nice sitting room, which is this picture, and then she's got an actual bedroom, and then she has a whole closet, and she's going to have one of the first bathtubs that the servants have to heat water in the basement kitchens and then haul up the stairs in order to fill the tub. Better make sure that water stays hot for the queen. Now, what we did in class is we read through an article in your reading packet called The Reign of Louis XIV. There are some vocab words in it that you'll need to know, and we were looking at whether Louis XIV was a good or bad leader, and how do you justify that, and what did he do. Our next ruler is going to be Frederick the Great. He is from the state of Prussia, starting with a P. It's an East German state, and he rules from 1740 to 1786, so it's a little bit later time period than the rest of the kings we've looked at. He is what we call an enlightened despot, which is a model for a new type of monarch. His fundamental goal, his belief, is to extend territories. So he wants to have a large standing army in order to gain more land and territory for his country. Now, where is Prussia? Well, on your notes, you've got a map. Okay. We've got England up here, the island, and then Spain, France, the Habsburg Empire. The Netherlands are, again, part of Spain. Russia's up here on the right. And Prussia is going to be northeast of the Habsburg Empire. We could actually move this a little bit that way. So it's kind of where Poland is today. But they're going to become a huge state later on. Next up is going to be Russia. They're ruled by the Romanov family from 1613 to 1917. And we'll talk later this year about how they end in 1917 with the Russian Revolution. But at this time, they are very much behind Western Europe in terms of development. They're still completely feudal. They are not modernized like the rest of Europe. So what is their feudal system called? They use some different names, okay? Whereas peasants in Russia are called serfs. The knights in Russia are called Cossacks. The nobles are called boyars. And the king is called the Tsar. Now the Tsar, the English translation of the word, this is the Russian word next to it in parentheses. Cyrillic is a very complicated language, alphabet. But the word Tsar has 4 different English spellings. So it doesn't matter which spelling it is, it's pronounced Tsar, as in Z-A-R. Okay, so that's the Russian system. The Tsar is in charge. The boyars are basically there to support the Tsar. The Cossacks are there basically as the military, and the serfs, the peasants, are tied to the land and cannot leave. So our ruler that we're going to look at for Russia, Peter the Great, comes along, and he's going to westernize and expand Russia. So he takes over some territory and tries to make it look more like Europe, because he traveled to Europe and invited a bunch of scholars back to help transform Russia into this new country that's much more Western, like the rest of Europe. So there's a video on the next slide. We'll also post it on Blackboard. But what you want to do is go watch that video and read the article in your packet and think about what different things Peter did. One of the things he did is move the Russian capital to St. Petersburg. He builds his own city, obviously named after himself. Because Moscow is in the center, kind of where Peter's shoulder is in the picture, and St. Petersburg has water access to the Atlantic through the Baltic Sea. So he wants to be able to have water. I would add St. Petersburg to your map in your notes so that you know where it is. In class, we then went and read through the reign of Peter the Great. There is some vocab for you from it, and we were looking at what specific things did Peter do to modernize Russia. So we just went through all of our different dynasties in Europe. That completes the notes in the chart below on your homework or on your notes packet. We just went through and listed the different things that the rulers did, so we had it in one place in a very simple short terms. Thanks for watching. Bye.